Hello YouTube, Mr. Mags here. Today we will be asking the question, what if every Pokemon region had a bug type gym leader? Now the bug typing isn't really the best. Most bug types don't really hit very hard. They don't really have high base stat totals. And it isn't helped by the fact that every single bug gym leader is fought super early in the region. There is one bug elite four member over there in Sinnoh, but outside of that, the latest bug specialist you can fight is Berg, who is the third gym leader in Unova. And that's honestly a shame because there are a ton of really cool, really strong bug types that I want to spotlight here by creating new bug gyms for every single region. So let's first go over the criteria for how I develop these teams. The gym leader team and position will be chosen based on the bug Pokemon native to the region. So I'll be looking at specifically the bug types introduced in any given region and creating gym leaders based on those. And I'll also be specifically saying where in the region this gym is located. I don't really like it typically when videos like this say, "Oh, here are the 4 or 5 best bug types. That's the eighth gym. You can work backwards from there." I don't really love that. I want to specifically make choices for where these gyms are located. There will be times where I do create an eighth gym, but in those instances, I'll also be creating at least one other gym earlier in the region just to add some variety. I'll be using the version of the region with the most options, platinum for Sinnoh, black and white 2 for Unova, etc. And I'll be not reusing aces of any bug type gym leaders or elite four members in the region unless necessary. Typically, this is actually not really a factor. There's usually so many other in my other videos, there's so many other Pokemon of the types I talked about where that's not really a factor outside of like 1 or 2 instances that I've used other aces just, for flavor. But in this case, there was one gym where I was basically forced to use a previous ace, and we'll get to that later. But for all the other teams, I'll also be able to use all other bug types of any other major trainer. So, for example, in the Kanto gym leader, I'll create Koga's Ace Venomoth from Yellow would be fair game. And the gym leader's overall strength will be based on the canon gym leaders of the region in question, if not slightly stronger. So the overall average base stat total of the gym position that I choose will be relatively similar to what that gym leader actually is. And in some instances, I'll make it slightly stronger, or I'll add an extra Pokemon or extra element or something. If especially in the Gen 5 and 6 games where I felt the fact that those gyms only cap at 3 Pokemon, they could benefit from being a little stronger, but those are gonna go by a case-by-case basis. So starting off with Kanto. For Kanto, I decided to make this the fourth gym with Scyther, Parasect, and Pinsir. And this is going to be mirroring Erica, how she has both Vileplume and Victreebel as dual aces. Scyther and Pinsir here are dual aces. Even though their Pinsir and Scyther, their base stat total is higher than Vileplume and Victreebel by just a little bit, I do think Parasect, it's has so many weaknesses, actually a lot of 4 times weaknesses. It's super slow. Its attack power is okay, but its typing and just other stats, I think, ground the rest of the team enough to make this work as a fourth gem. But I did want to also make another gym for this region, just to zero in on who I think the like true ace of that gym could be. So I made one that is the sixth gym with Venomoth, Parasect, Pinsir, and Scyther as the actual ace. Pinsir can kind of be the secondary ace, but Scyther is the true ace. And honestly, with just how many good bug types there were in this region, it's honestly a little surprising that there wasn't some kind of bug specialist in Kanto, especially since the reason Pokemon exists is because of Satoshi Tajiri's love of bug collecting when he was younger. So it's kind of surprising that there wasn't a bug specialist. In fact, Pinsir and Scyther weren't really used on any major teams across the entire game. So it's I think fitting that there should be a bug specialist in Kanto. Moving over to Johto, I actually created three different teams for Johto. I wasn't sure which one I liked the best. I eventually landed on one that I do think is my favorite, and I'll signal that one out as I go. But for the purposes of just presenting all the ideas I came up with, I did include all three teams I created in this presentation. So the first one I created is one for the first gym with a Pineco and a Yanma. Now, Pineco I think is interesting here because A, it it's one of those Pokemon that I always confused growing up about what its type is. I always thought it was a grass or grass and bug type. It looks like a pine cone. Its name is Pineco. I know like lore wise that it's supposed to look like it's mimicking something that looks like that in real life. So like bagworms specifically create their cocoons out of leaves and like straw and that kind of thing. But it's always been something that like in my head I always like for a while growing up I always pegged it as a grass type. So putting it here on the bug team would help with that confusion that I don't think I'm the only one who had that. So yeah, it would help people identify it more as a bug type. And also it's just probably the sturdiest bug type in the region. It even as a Pineco, it's still pretty defensive. It's probably not going to go down at even one or two hits, even from super effective moves that early in the game. It's still gonna take some time to take down. It won't be able to hurt very much. Tackle and rapid spin maybe can set up spikes, but it won't know like bug bite or any other or even kind of strong moves. It won't know self-destruct or anything crazy like that, but it'll at least take a little bit of effort to take down. And after you take that down, you have Yanma, who is a lot faster than anything you have up to that point. They could potentially mess you up with Supersonic, and it could potentially even know Sonic Boom, which deals a set 20 damage. Nothing on your team up to that point can take probably more than two of those. So I think this actually makes for a pretty decent first gym. But there are so many other cool bug types in this region that I did create other teams as well. I created one that is the fourth gym with Ledian, Ariados, and Heracross. Heracross deserved to be the ace of something in Johto. And the fact that there is a bug and two fighting specialists in Johto and Heracross isn't on any of their teams is absolutely criminal. Like, even if it was just on Bruno's team, not even the ace, I'm fine with Machamp being the ace there. But Heracross should have been on the team instead of his Onyx. But the fact that Heracross instead is nowhere, not on the rivals team, no major trainers use Heracross outside of post game rematches and Heart Gold, Soul Silver. That is absolutely criminal. So it deserves to be the ace somewhere. And I think the fourth gem makes as much sense as anywhere else. It has the same base set total as Morty's typical ace of Gengar, and then Ledian and Ariados being the version exclusive Pokemon. I think it's kind of fun to have them also here, especially since the trainer theoretically wouldn't even like see one of those up to that point. Ledian would be able to set up dual screens, and then Ariados can, be not a roadblock per se, but especially if we're talking Gen 4, they could potentially mess you up with stuff like Sucker Punch or like trap you with Spiderweb. Uh I think there's some shenanigans you can get into with that. But the main standout here is Heracross. And then lastly, I did make one that is the eighth gem with Fortress, Shuckle, Yanma, Heracross, and Scizor. Heracross here is kind of the secondary ace, with Scizor being the true ace. Um, I would have liked if there was one other, semi-decent bug type, just so we didn't have the overlap in typings here with Scizor and Fortress both being dual steel bug types. But the rest of the team has very good variety. So I like this a lot. I could give or take having Yanma here. I had originally a thought at one point of having Yan Mega instead of Fortress, but I felt like that kind of ruined what Heart Gold Soul Silver were going for. So definitely in a post game rematch, it would have Yan Mega. But since the Mega is so sorry, since the Yanma is so relatively weak, I think even removing it and keeping the rest of the team the same, since Fortress and Shuckle are so defensively good, they can't hit very hard, but Fortress can use definitely use Explosion, it can set up entry hazards, and Shuckle can maybe even use Power Trick. It's the eighth gym. I think they could get away with something like that. But regardless, Heracross and Scizor are the real like meat of this team. And I think that would work overall as an eighth gem, even without Yanma here. Now for Hoenn, I think this works as a sixth gem with Ninjask, Pinsir, Masquerain, and Armaldo. Now, I had to make a choice here, and also I made the same choice in the Ghost video a couple of vids back, where do I think it makes sense to have Shedinja on a gym leader team? And I eventually settled on no, at least not in a initial fight. In a post-game fight, sure, that's fair game, but in a typical fight, probably not. Especially with like, how Pokemon games are played these days, where a lot of people play them with like challenge runs and Nuzlocks, single Pokemon runs, like that kind of thing. Having a Shedinja on any of these teams could potentially just completely make those playthroughs just completely unfinishable. So I decided to not include them on teams here. Otherwise, Shedinja would be there instead of Pinsir. But I do like Pinsir here, especially since Winota in the sixth gym slot typically uses a Skarmory who isn't a Gen 3 Pokemon. So I think it'd be cool to have one non-Gen 3 Pokemon here. And Pinsir actually having a higher base set total than Armaldo. I think that's also fine, especially since Ninjask and Masquerain in any game that actually has Hoenn in it is they're both not very strong. But you know, you have the Ninjas be able to set up Swords Dance and speed boosts for either Pinsir or Armaldo to just absolutely go crazy on you. So I think even though individually all these Pokemon aren't like the absolute best, I think together it could work. Even in Gen 3, where Masquerain is typically more of a special attacker, yet it can't really, you know, do that to the best ability since all flying and bug moves are physical. If Ninjask sets up a sword stance, the baton passes to Masquerain, they can then intimidate you to help its longevity, and then use Gust or Silver Wind or something like that to and actually hit pretty hard with it. And then I think Armaldo was just the obvious ace here. It it's definitely not a traditional bug type, especially not one that these bug maniacs or bug catcher type character would typically use, but it is definitely the most impressive bug type in Hoenn, so I think it deserves to be the ace here. Now for Sinnoh, I think this works best as the third gem with Mothim, Wormadam. I picked the sandy one. I just kind of picked one at random, and I think the now I just felt the sandy one. Sure, why not? And then Vespiquen. This could easily be the steel one. Definitely not the grass one because that would just have 4 times weak to fire and flying, which Bug already has a major weakness to. And the sandy one would actually be able to help against those types since they can learn ground and rock moves. So I think that I think that works well here. And then Vespiquen, I think that just screams ace potential, especially for an earlier gym. But I did actually also create another gym in this region just because there are a lot of really good, or at least like fairly good bug flying types in this region. Similar to how I created an all bird Pokemon gym leader in my Kanto flying type video, I also created an all bug flying gym leader that is the seventh gym with Mothim, Scyther, Vespiquen, and yet Mega as the ace. So yeah, I wanted to spot like Mega somewhere here, and I think this makes the most sense. Now for Unova, I do think there are enough really good bug types in this region to warrant an eighth gym. And there's even a couple here that I didn't use, like Leaveney, obviously on Berg's team typically, and Crustle even, could also work here. But I wanted uh the team to be Axelgor, Escavalier, Galvantula, and Scolipede. I picked Galvantula over Crustle just to have another special attacker. And Scolipede here is holding the Bug Gym. I really like the idea of the all the fifth gym leaders use having some kind of battle mechanic a la Z moves or Mega Evolutions if they had the idea to do some kind of battle mechanic like that one gen earlier, they absolutely would have done something like using those gems on their team. So the first time he used like Steamroller or some other bug move, it would be that much stronger. But as I said in the intro, if I do make one that is the eighth gym, I also create another gym that is earlier. And I create one that is the fourth gym, and with a completely new set of bug types. None of these Pokemon overlap. Some of their types do, like Durant and Escavalier, but Larvesta, Durant, and Crustle, like you could make a very formidable six-team bug type, champion team and still have some left over. I think Volcarona would be too strong even for like an eighth gym leader, especially since it evolves at 59. I don't think you need it. I think that is definitely champion, like at least Elite Four, but most ideally champion level. But Larvesta, I think, could definitely work here. And Crustle, I think, it works well here as the ace, especially since Gen 5 introduced the new way that Sturdy works. So you would not be able to one-shot it unless you use some kind of multi-hit attack. So yeah, I actually kind of prefer this team a little bit. Um, I think this team is obviously a little more like imposing and is a better representation of the type throughout the region as a whole. But I don't know, just something about this team just kind of speaks to me a little better, just as a you know starting the mid game type gym leader. Now, Kalos. This is the gym I was talking about where I did have to cheat a little bit with my theory crafting because for some insane reason, Kalos introduced only a single new bug type line, that being Vivian. They didn't think they should introduce a single other bug type. There was a bunch of Pokemon that had Mega Evolutions, but those are all previous gen Pokemon. The only new bug type was the first root bug, and that's crazy to me. So in order to have any Kalos representation on this team, I had to use Vivian. So it's not going to be the ace because it is not even close to strong enough. But I made one that is the seventh gem with Vivian, and then three Pokemon that have potential to Mega Evolve: Pinsir, Heracross, and then Mega Scizor. Those are the only options. And I do genuinely think that by the time you get to the seventh gym, if not even a little earlier, Kalos gym leaders should use a Mega Stone. So I chose Mega Scizor. Any of those other ones could work as a Mega, but I used Pinsir earlier in the flying video, and I will use Heracross in the fighting video later. And I did not use Scizor in my steel video, so that was Mega Lucario. So I put Mega Scizor here. But I did also create another one that I actually like even more, despite not having any actual Gen 6 representation. Um, One that is the eighth gem with Scizor, Pinsir, Heracross, and Mega Beedrill. This one is maybe a little far-fetched because Mega Beedrill doesn't exist in base Kalos. It's only in Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire. But if we're going off the fact that the most updated version of the region will be Legend ZA, and that game uh has mega evolutions that are from Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, I think Mega Beedrill is fair game here. So yeah, I think this squad as a whole definitely warrants 8th gen status. Now Alola typically doesn't have gym leaders, but I made one, with an idea of like, essentially looked at all of the other gym leaders of other regions and kind of guesstimated about the power level of any given gym leader in this region. But in this instance, similar to my poison video where I made Plumera the poison gym leader of that region, I'm headcanoning that Guzma would be able to be reformed and made a gym leader in this region. And I think it's only fitting for him to be the 8th gym leader. In Ultra Sun and Moon, Guzma is actually a pretty strong trainer. Like all of his Pokemon are actually pretty well EV trained. They all like they don't all have like competitive move sets, but they all have like pretty decent move sets. So if you're, especially his mastering, which I don't have here, but um if you're not like fully prepared to take on each of his Pokemon, you could potentially get steamrolled by him. So I think to kind of keep that spirit, the 8th gym works well for him. With Golisopod as his ace, that only makes sense, I think. Ribombee, Araquanid, and Vikavolt. Now, I don't love Golisopod and Araquanid both having that water bug typing, but they both do stuff that's so different. Golisopod definitely more of a bug type. Araquanid is definitely more of a water type, especially with Araquanid's ability. So I think this works here. And I didn't create another gym leader for this one just because I think him being the 8th gym is just too perfect. Now for Galar, I mean, one that is the 8th gym with Crustle, Frostmoth, Orbeetle, and Gigantamax Centiskorch. And it's honest, like I know why is the case because Frostmoth and Centiskorch were used other places, but the fact that there are three really good bug types in Galar, it's kind of surprising there wasn't some kind of bug specialist somewhere in the region. So I used Frostmoth, Orbeetle, and Centiskorch. And then Crustle, with it being the 8th gym and it having that sturdy ability, so you can't one-shot it, I think it'd only be fair for it to be able to use Shell Smash. Um, and then any, you know, flying and fire Pokemon that you hope to take on the rest of the team with will be steamrolled by this Crustle. But I did also create another gym in this region, especially since Orbital also has a Gigantamax form. One that is the 3rd gym with Araquanid, Frostmoth, and Orbital. And I could kind of, the Araquanid spot is kind of interchangeable here, but Araquanid's water typing is great into both fire and rock types, which the rest of the team will struggle with. So I think you send out your starter. You would still be a Raboot by that point, hoping to basically be able to, if not solo, put a pretty big dent into his bug types. He first sends out Araquanid, that can kind of ruin your plans. Lastly, we have Paldea, and usually for these videos, I will create 3 different teams to represent the 3 different ways that terrestrialization can be used. One, it's a Pokemon of their type that terrestrializes into their type to make their moves even stronger. One where it's a Pokemon of their type that terrestrializes into a different type to be either offensively or defensively great into Pokemon that type usually struggles with. And then the last one, how they do it actually in game, where it's a Pokemon not of their type that terrestrializes into their type to kind of reference how that Pokemon, should have been that type all along, or some kind of like uh has some kind of mechanic that meshes well with that type, to kind of uh give an example both ways, like how Sudowoodo, looks like a grass type, Crabominable. A lot of other crab Pokemon are water types, so Crabominable turns into water type, and then the other way, Miss Magius having Levitate meant that when it goes into a electric type, it technically has no weaknesses. So yeah, that one in this instance, I'll get to it in just a second, but I like the choice I landed on, but it definitely wasn't the cleanest, especially compared to some of my other videos. But I did end up actually liking my choice. But first, I think it works as the 3rd gym with Low Kicks being the ace, who translates into a grass type and then hits you with a very strong U-turn into either Spidops or Rabsca. Ideally Spidops, who can then set up Sticky Web, potentially other entry hazards. It can, switch you out with Storm Throw, Circle Throw, yeah, Circle Throw. And then, you go back into low kicks, and ideally this low kicks with no first impression, but it doesn't learn that move until way later. And it's like, I think level 40 something. And by the third gym, it definitely would not be level 40 something. But U-turn would still be pretty devastating, even like leech life to keep it healthy. And then, if you manage to take down low kicks, the thinned out Rabsca, it can use Revival Blessing to bring low kicks back. It wouldn't keep its terrestrialization, but it can still then, uh, regain health with leech life. It could out prioritize you with Sucker Punch. I just think this just works very well as a team, especially for the third gym. Even though Spidops isn't the strongest Pokemon, it still, I think, does a pretty good job being a support role for the team. But for the other team, I think Low Kick should still be the ace here. It translates into a rock type. Now, rock is very good into both fire and flying, and also other bug types, which low kicks typically struggled with. Unfortunately, low kicks doesn't learn any rock type moves. I thought for sure it would learn at least rock tomb or something like that, but it can use Terra Blast. That's what that move is for. So if you do throw out a strong flying or fire type, it can translate it into a rock type and immediately hit you uh, with that tear move or U-turn out. And in this instance, ideally, it would have its hidden ability Tinted Lens. Like I feel a little weird sometimes about giving, especially earlier gyms, these hidden abilities. But considering it's only three Pokemon, the bug typing can kind of use all the help it can get. I think it's cool if this low kicks would know it's would have its hidden ability Tinted Lens. So lastly, like I said, you know, this isn't the cleanest one. Definitely not nearly as clean as Golduck being a psychic type or Luxray being a dark type. But I essentially looked at all the other Pokemon that learned first impression, and I narrowed it down to two Pokemon. And I used one of them before. I initially had the idea of using Phalanx, but I actually used Phalanx in the Steel video uh, in this way. And if possible, I want to have, as many different kinds of teams as possible. So I went with the option that I think actually kind of works even better, an eighth gym leader that leads with a Haxorus. And this Haxorus knows first impression. It is an egg move for it, but clearly Game Freak has the same general idea that Haxorus has some kind of bug vibe to it. Maybe they're a fan of Hunter x Hunter and clearly agree that Haxorus has a very similar vibe to a lot of the Chimera ants from that from that show. Or maybe at some point in development, Haxorus was going to be like a standalone bug dragon type, and they connected it more to Fracture and Axew. Because I've always thought that Haxorus a was more of a deviation from where I thought those two were going, but still a great Pokemon. It just is one of the candidates to be a bug dragon, and we can't make it bug dragon, but we can make it a dragon type that becomes a bug type. So there you go. We keep low kicks, we're keeping Rapska, and I also threw Volcarona on here, mostly just because I hadn't used it up to this point. I wanted to use it somewhere. And even though both Haxorus and Volcarona both have incredibly high base stat totals, this team's average base stat total is actually only 5 points higher than Grusha's typical eighth gem in this region. So obviously, Volcarona would have the issue of being way underleveled, but I'm pretty sure there are wild Volcarona in Paldea that are underleveled, so we can just assume they caught one out in the wild that is underleveled. Okay, so please let me know down below what you thought about all of these teams. Thank you so much for watching, and please, have I like to have a discussion about you know, any thoughts you have about any of, any choices I made here? Are there any Pokemon that I made an ace that you thought didn't deserve it, or another Pokemon that you thought would work better, or any Pokemon I completely forgot about, any gym leader positions that you thought were wrong or could be adjusted? Yeah, please have that discussion down below. I intend on making one of these videos for every single type. And yeah, I'd love to continue, modifying and improving these for the future. So, you know, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.